Yeah.
Welcome home. We are WNST. Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore positive. We do a lot of sports around here. We got football, baseball in September. But my God, what a concert week. Pearl Jam is in on Thursday night. Bruce Springsteen is in on Friday night. Styx is in on Friday night. I got calls out to everyone. And you just wonder who still loves you. You know, Nils Lofgren's a little busy this week, the great Nils Lofgren of Maryland. And I've interviewed almost every member of Styx. I've had Tommy
Right.
on many times. I've had JY and I are famously friends. Todd Zuckerman did the show a couple years ago. Even Chucky did the show back when he wrote his book. Dennis DeYoung even did the show a million years ago. I have never had Lawrence Gowan on the program. So my request was, can he zoom in long distance from Canada? Can he make it over here? Do we have to talk hockey if I have him on? Lawrence Gowan and I have met many, many times. I have fun pictures with you. You know, the one thing I think about your crazy band and knowing you guys, and the first concert I ever saw on the Grand Illusion tour at the Baltimore Civic Center. I was a very young man, and
Wow.
I love your band, but you are a working freaking band, man. You guys, the older you get, the harder you work.
Yeah. Well, great to be on your show finally, Nestor. I'm thanks for asking. And yes, we when I joined, which was I'm into my 26th year now. We passed the 25th anniversary a
At
few
least you're not
months
the
ago.
new guy anymore.
I guess not. I'm I'm the old new guy. So when I joined, JY, and Tommy and Chuck, their goal was that Sticks have to play a baseline of 100 shows a year. There are so many markets, or whatever you want to say, countries even that they had neglected to get to enough times. And there was such a reawakening culturally for classic rock right around that area. They thought we have to get on this kind of a schedule right now. So that's why we have maintained that ever since. It's worked well. No one thought that it would go into this, a quarter century, or half the band's life now has been this incessant touring schedule. But it really is what classic rock bands, it is the mandate of today, because people, I mean, there's so few of them left in the world, and classic rock is the great musical statement that people want, of the last half of the 20th century, that people want. They have an insatiable appetite for it. And so we're happy to provide.
Well, you're doing a bunch of shows. I should also say you're in Ocean City with Cheap Trick on Saturday. You're up in Hershey
Yeah,
on Sunday.
thank
So
you.
if you got Bruce tickets on Friday and you can't make it to the
Yes,
Lyric, you got other chances to see Styx this weekend. So and please,
right.
so the thing I would say about your band is first band I ever saw, first band I ever loved. I loved Rush too. So we're going to talk about that with you being neighbors. And you're always the nice Canadian guy when I meet the band. You're always the guy bringing me the drinks and whatnot. So I would just say for you and classic rock and all of these years later, the notion that when you were a kid in the 80s growing up and Queen Street scene and all that stuff, that this
Yep.
could still be a thing. I mean, I remember when Mick Jagger on Tattoo You, it was, oh, he's 38, it's getting a little old, and
Yeah.
for a lifetime for me, I'm 55, a little younger than you. It's what I do. I'm a sports guy. I've done sports 30 years. Anybody that listens to me knows that sports has not treated me nearly as well as music. Music, I'm never a loser. When Styx goes off in Place Come Sail Away at the end of the night in Renegade, I leave a winner every night. Music has
Yeah.
followed me in my life in a way that I don't know that I knew about when I was a younger person.
That's a tremendous observation. I do say quite often that music is the one thing in life that does not have the capacity to let you down. It just doesn't. It will lift you to a great place, no matter where you are in your life. You could be in the worst circumstances and going through heartache, or any sort of difficult times. Music is going to be there. When you're at your happiest of times, music's going to be there. Sports, is it's a great sideshow. I call it. It's exciting as hell, but it also has the capacity to kind of let you down in a lot of ways when some of your favorites, for example, can no longer perform. And I've spoken to a lot of athletes. You wondered if we're going to wedge hockey into this, and yeah, we have to, because by government law, I have to at least discuss hockey at least for at least half a
Well, you
minute.
talk about disappointment. You're a Maple Leaf guy, right?
Yeah, of course.
Well,
So
there
for
you go. So
example,
you remember 67, but that's all you got, right?
I do. That's all I got. That's all.
I'm an
I'm
Oriole
fresh
fan.
out.
I got 83, you know?
I'm fresh out. Congratulations. And your t-shirt's in great shape if that's from 83. By the way, I saw when I first joined Styx, I think a couple of years into the band, I think it was 2001, the Ravens, Baltimore Ravens were in the Super
You guys
Bowl.
played it.
That's right.
I have a picture of me and Tommy in the hotel at the Hyatt in Tampa. I do.
No kidding. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's
And my
great.
and all
Yeah.
my purple regalia. The whole
Yep.
deal.
Yep.
You guys, you guys rock. And I think that's the thing. Like, I was going to make a best of times reference with you, and you sing Dennis's part in the band, and like 25 years later and all that. But the thing that I think people don't know about you, they're like, Babe, I'm leaving, or Come Sail It With Me, like more melodic stuff. But when you go see Styx, anytime in your era, last 25 years, you would leave saying, damn, they rock more than I think they do. And I think every time I see you, I think you're a real rock band. And people don't understand that from the softer side of ballads.
I suppose. I mean, the great thing with one of the many great aspects of Styx is that they had a very wide palette as far as what they could do. They could do pop, they could do rock, they could do progressive. They had all of those recovered, and in an era when it was hard to stay afloat. If the next thing they needed was a number one single, they were able to do it. If the next thing they needed was a concept album, they were able to do it, and do it really, really well. So that's what one of the things I was attracted to is with the band. However, as you point out, the one thing that they wanted to lean on more when I joined the band was the rock element of it, and so we have done that. That's basically possibly what makes our shows so high energy. Believe it or not, that people are always shocked with the fact that we've been around for such a long time, and yet the show has a high intensity of energy factor. Let's call it that. And a band that leans into it and leans on the rock side of their career just tends to do better in big arenas and in bigger venues, and even in theaters. I'd say there's more of a concussive thing that happens there when the band leans toward the rock side of what they can do. And Styx, that's where I began with the band, and that's where we've kind of held things.
New albums, new music. Some folks, some of your albums haven't sold great. I get them all going back to Cyclorama and like through all the new era of music. But every
Hmm.
time I go and see you guys, you're creating music. And I haven't talked to Tommy. I had JY on during the plague, and I saw Tommy's work with his piano. I mean, we all had masks on. We're sitting at home. I'm watching all of you who were performing, whether it's Garth Brooks and his wife, whatever that was going on. But that period of time, you guys, you've never stopped really making new music. And sometimes I come to the show and say, can you just play lights for me? And sometimes I come and you're like, well, we're gonna play a whole album, Grand Illusion, whatever, Pieces 8. You've done
Yeah.
that stuff as well.
Yeah.
But you're not just a working band out on the road, but I'm just astonished that, and I'm not, because you're artists, that you want to create new stuff, whether we want to hear it or not. You want us to hear it, and you've never stopped. I mean, like, as a lot of classic rock bands just say, look, we got our 12 songs, maybe 15, 18, we'll go play those. But you've never been that band, and maybe that speaks to Tommy a little bit.
Certainly it speaks to Tommy's, but it speaks to the entire band. First of all, the lifeblood of a band, I believe is a multiple factor to keep the body in shape. One is playing live and having that endless, give and take from an audience that tells you whether you're still doing the right thing or not. But the next thing is new ideas, new music coming along. And as far as sales go, there's a different parameter to that now, a different benchmark. So we made, for example, our most recent album, Crash of the Crown. We made that. We started it actually in 2019, but we really, dug in and finished it over 2020 when everyone was away. When we came back to touring in 2021, it went straight to number one on Billboard's rock album chart. So there's a rock album chart now because they've divided up all these charts, mainly because new music that's mostly streamed. So we'll say rap, hip hop, and that genre that dominates, as far as the pop charts go, etc. But rock music now has, especially classic rock music, has its own its own definition on the charts, its own category, much the same as when I was growing up, there was a jazz chart. You know,
Sure.
jazz was the big musical statement of the first half of the 20th century. Rock is the big statement of the last half of the 20th century. And I remember seeing, well, why have they got this little jazz chart over here on the side? Well, because it's an important music. It's proved itself over the course of time. And so I think it's good that Billboard and other publications have a rock album chart, because this is it's, I hate to use the word, but it's a legitimized form of music now that is still being represented, and we continue to make new music. And as soon as we finish up here in Esther, I get right back to working on new Styx things.
Well, and you guys are on the road all the time too. Does that make it? Do you play with stuff on the road as a band with new stuff? I mean, are you always sort of in a place where I'm working on a song? Because I'm a writer. I'm always writing something. I mean, and I'm 55. Whether anybody's going to read it or not, I never know. But it's a cathartic thing. I've got to do it. It's
It is.
part of what makes me me at this point in my life.
Well, that articulates it really well. It's part of what makes us us. Is when we're in the dressing room a couple of hours before the show, new things are getting kicked around and played and jammed on. And if we do a sound check, it's the same thing. It's the newer things. However, we're aware of the fact that as a band with a legacy that stretches over half a century, over 50 years, people are coming to the show to hear, Blue Collar Man, Grand Illusion, Come Sail Away, Renegade, Mr. Roboto,
I'm
Lady,
always pissed when you don't play
Blue Collar
lights, but
Man.
and I just me, it's not one of your big hits, but you play it every once in a while, and I have
I love it.
requested it, and I have heard it. I remember one night in Lancaster you played it. I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you break it out.
I love lights. I really love lights. It's funny, we do that one occasionally. We brought Light Up back in a couple of weeks ago. We've been doing Lorelei now for the last couple of years, because that's really
My wife's
resurgent in
favorite song,
popularity.
by the way. Yes, Lorelei.
Yeah, great. Obviously, she has very good taste. And uh, what else have we been throwing in recently? I think we're going to bring Man in the Wilderness will probably come back in a little. But you know what? JY said years ago, there's an embarrassment of riches when it comes to great Styx songs to play in a concert. So for that very reason, I extracted myself many years ago, probably about 20 years ago, from deciding what's going to be on the set list, because it's no one's wrong. It's just that you've got 5 different or 6 different opinions going on in the dressing room. I'm like, just hand me the menu. I know it's going to work out really well. I know how this is going to end.
Lawrence Gowan is here, the good Scottish man from Canada who has been in Styx for 25 years. First time I visited with you, but we visited many times privately. It's so much with you because I could have talked hockey and hockey season or any of that kind of stuff with you. But when I come to Canada, and I try to come once or twice a year to get my passport stamp, make sure I get a little. I love Canada. Anybody that knows
Good.
me knows that. But when I go in, I always fly up to Buffalo, and I always have breakfast with my buddy, and then I cross the Peace Bridge and I come over. And the cool
Great.
part of Canadian radio is, and I'm sort of weirdly addicted to it. I sometimes listen at home. It's all Canadian, right? Like the mandate of the government is, I will hear a Gowan song. I will hear some April Wine. I will hear some Honeymoon Suite. I get to
Yes.
hear stuff. That's the beauty of your country, I think, in one way that a lot of Americans don't know that if they haven't driven in. When they put the radio station on, you go hear
Yeah.
some Rush. You might even hear some Anne Murray and some Bare Naked
Right.
Ladies. I had Stephen Page on
Right.
one of your countrymen a few weeks ago.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Yes, you might. Oh, Stephen, good. Um, you're right. Now, the reason they brought in they did the same thing in Australia, smaller countries that were in on the music industry when things were really. You might know, people might be aware that back when, particularly in the United States, you could do all kinds of favors for radio stations to get your song played on the air.
I own a radio station. So in
Yes.
my FCC thing, plugola, payola, their actual word, plugola was a word. That was a
It
radio
was. It was categorized as independent radio promotion, and that's why,
bribe.
again,
Just a bribe is what we call it in America.
right. But in Canada and in Australia, realizing that to combat that and have our own artists rise, since payola didn't really exist here, or if it did, it was in its infancy. They basically made it okay. You have to play 20% Canadian content. That's on television and on radio. All broadcast has to be 20% Canadian content. Now, Australia went 50% Australian content. And at the time, there was a great backlash to it. I know that radio stations and TV were like, well, what are we going to play? Like local club bands like AC/DC? And they're like, yeah, you're going to play that. And the next thing you know, you have AC/DC. Here it was the same
Then
with
you have
Rush.
In Excess, and you have, all
Exactly.
right,
And so
sure.
it's the same because without that exposure, and if you're it's to try to level the playing field, so to speak. So for example, we had much music in Canada, whereas that was kind of our equivalent of MTV. And radio, we still play, quite honestly, it's about the great thing about growing up here is it would be about 50% American content, about 30% British, and that's arbitrarily, and 20% was mandated Canadian. So bands would begin to emerge because at least Rush could get on the radio, Brian Adams could get on the radio, et cetera. And this helped their careers to blossom. In my case, it was simply that I was signed to Columbia Records in Canada, but not released by Columbia Records in the United States, even though they owned the rights to my records. And that's quite a common story. So people will hear myself or like the Tragically Hip, which is actually the biggest band ever in Canada, and yet most people in the United States don't know who they are. So
The great Gord Downie. Yes.
yeah, the great Gord Downey. So there you go. But you're familiar with this because you've come here a lot. Now, since I've been in Styx, tons of Styx fans come to when I do solo shows here in Canada. They come in from the US. They usually somehow get the first few rows, and I'll be playing to a lot of the Styx faithful in my solo shows, and I absolutely love that. I finally got some US exposure to my own music.
Lawrence Gowan is here. He infamously replaced Dennis DeYoung many years ago, 25 years ago. Let's talk about members of bands and
Yeah,
your band specifically, because
yeah,
I've been at it from the beginning. I saw John play back in the day, and through all of it, Chuck and I guess Burtnick and the people that have been in and out of the band, Ricky Phillips, the latest member of the Babies. I mean, Bad English, the whole deal. He
mhm,
decided, like all 60 something, 70, maybe I want to stay home with Mike. Maybe it's time, maybe where we
yeah,
are. And then you replace members. It was so controversial when it was you, Foreigner. I know
mhm,
you had this incredible tour this summer with Foreigner.
yeah, yeah,
And, some members aren't in bands anymore. You were of that first generation of,
yeah,
that ain't Dennis anymore. Can he sing
yeah,
like that? And you had that scrutiny. And look, I'm a kid from Baltimore. It's like replacing Brooks Robinson for anyone in a band, whether the person is deceased or just they can't get along or business or whatever. You really carried that, maybe more than most other guys performing a role in a band. It's very common 25 years later, but you were on the first end of that.
yeah.
That was tough for you. I think when
Well,
you show up and say, "Hey, where's Dennis?" People were looking for that, and you were always great for me. I like Dennis, and I know that but it was
so do
always
I.
sort of a. Do you know Dennis?
No, we met briefly when we did a show together in Montreal, but I do feel obviously since I've been in a band and sung songs that he's been either part of the writing of or was the writing of that we are we're kindred in that sense, and I am as proud of Styx as he's proud of Styx. It's funny, I have the same sort of thing. So there's that there is that connection, and I think that's a more profound one anyway. But I would say this first of all. The word replacement has never been used within the band. I always kind of get a bit of a wince at that because, and it goes back to, because I'm a fan as well. I never felt that Phil Collins replaced Peter Gabriel as the lead singer of Genesis. Phil Collins became the singer of Genesis, and Peter Gabriel luckily went on and had, for us fans, went on and had this stellar solo career. So
I
I
feel like
got the
it's
best
Sammy
of
Hagar and
both.
Van Halen. There's two Van Halens. There really are,
Exactly.
right?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't ever think that Hagar replaced David Lee Roth. I don't. I never think of it that way. And when I joined Styx, Tommy, JY, and Chuck, when I spoke to him in that year, that was one of his most difficult years health wise. But the word replaced, or the word to try to emulate or in any way do an impression of, was never ever brought up. They're like, no, you sing the songs the way you sing them, and that's the best way that we can move forward is basically and then people can like it or dislike it or be indifferent to it. that's entirely up to the audience. I mean, and that's something you have to bow to as a performer anytime. So I always look at it like, no, I joined the band at that point, and I brought whatever cards I have, I brought those and put them on the table, and have been doing it so ever since. And we are, and I've said this often, we are the culmination. Styx that you see today, we are the culmination of the efforts of everyone who's ever been in that band. So John Panazzo, John Serlewski, Dennis DeYoung, Glenn Burtnick, Ricky Phillips. These are all people that have contributed, to varying degrees to what the band is today. And the same for Foreigner. Every guy in Foreigner, as you mentioned, but they were all handpicked by Mick Jones, who's the center of that band, every single one of them. So it ties to what Rick Wakeman predicted back in 1990. I read an article in New Music Express where he said there will be a yes 100 years from now when our grandchildren are off the earth. Because much the same as there's a London Symphony today that play Beethoven, there was a London Symphony 200 years ago that played Beethoven, and no one says, hey, that's not the same first chair violinist I saw 200 years ago. It's all how you want to look at that. If you're really connected to the original members of a band, then the Rolling Stones ended when Brian Jones was no longer in the band for you. But I've seen the Rolling Stones, and I see Ron Wood and think he's every bit as much a Rolling Stone as anybody on that stage. So it's all basically your own perspective and your subjective opinion on these things.
Last time I was in your beautiful country, I came in to go to Massey Hall, a place I'd never been,
Yeah.
famously with Rush and Farewell to Kings and like all this world stage, excuse me. And
Yep.
I went in. They're the most unique band, right? I mean, even U2 now I've seen without their original drummer because he couldn't play on the last tour out at the Sphere.
Yep.
And
Yep.
but Rush, like you're Canadian, you got a Rush thing. Please tell me you have at least a little bit of a Rush thing.
Well, I was managed by the same manager as Rush for 14 years. So from 1981 to 1997, yeah, I was with Ray Daniels. So he was my manager. So I got to know the Rush guys. Alex Lifeson is the guitarist on my fourth album. He's on that whole record. You can look up Lost Brotherhood. We did a video together. Um, so I know those guys quite well, in that we would see each other 2-3 times a year at something at the office. Um, just had a nice text from Getty Lee just yesterday, so I
Tell him
can
I
talk.
love him. Tell him I still
But
love him. I've always loved him. Let him know.
Nestor still
Do
loves
Gaddy?
you.
Yeah, it's good. All right, it's good.
Don't be don't
Tell him you're the
don't worry,
Canadian
don't
that'll come
worry,
on the
don't worry.
show.
Nestor absolutely still loves.
Tell him I'm
texting him
coming
right
to
now.
see his baseball collection. Let him know. Just let him know. That's right.
His baseball collection is astounding.
Unbelievable.
Just amazing human beings were in that are part of that band. All three, phenomenal sense of humor and just great people. Even in the brief encounters, we've actually played hockey together. So, but yes, so I know those guys in association with under the same management for a good number of years. What was the question?
No, just that, they were the band that never broke up, that never had to get on stage in any other
No,
way. And then, then they had this tragedy with Neil, but
right.
they're the original, like there are very few bands that went 50 years and never stood on stage with a Lawrence instead of a Dennis or
That's right.
you're a Ron Wood instead of a Brian Jones, right?
They are the exception. They are the exception. To this point, they're the exception. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the future? If they may want to go out and play Rush songs and not call it Rush, I don't know. But yes, there's always an exception. It's like even, for example, Aerosmith. I don't think they had any changes at all, did they?
No, they didn't. Yeah.
No,
And
and now sadly, hopefully his voice will recover. Steven Tyler's, but yeah, every band, honestly, Nestor, every band is unique, just like every family is unique. And sometimes some families are built on, adopted kids, and some are built on, the indigenous to that very family. Unusual things happen within the camp of every single band. That's been my observation anyway, from being around these bands. There's no two alike. The main thing is this: the songs outlive everyone anyway. And the melodies and the lyrics in Styx songs are strong enough that they've survived over half a century. So I'm proud and happy to be part of that legacy, in that it's extended the life of the band.
Ricky out of the band. And people don't know Evan. I came out and I saw Evan on stage. I think here in Timonium, you played the fair, and JY was out and with his wife, and I'm like, hey, who's that guy? And I had to Google, and I mean, he's been a part of the band for a decade, really, in studio ways and in different ways, but sort of a new member as well as your brother, correct?
Oh yeah. Okay. So no, you're referring to Willie Vankovich. Will began working with the band actually shortly after he produced Tommy's solo record. He began working co-writing with Tommy, and then I got into that, so it became kind of a three-way co-writes that we came up with the album The Mission, and which he produced and co-wrote 2017, and then of course Crash of the Crown. Now, when we did the Mission shows, because we did a series of shows where we played the Mission in its entirety, and because it had sold enough copies and enough people wanted to see that record because it's a concept album in its entirety. So we did 3 nights in Las Vegas, a night in Boston, a night in New York, and a night in Washington. We did several of
I was
them.
at
Will,
that show. Yeah, I know
yeah,
you did. It was
okay.
a small little thing you did with the Mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Will joined us on stage for that, you'll remember. And then after Crash the Crown, we just figured, why don't we just keep him, keep him in on stage every night, and he joined the band. And great move. And then with the departure of Ricky, Terry was the most obvious one because I mean he and Todd. When I play my solo shows, by the way, I just played Massey Hall just a couple months ago solo as a Gowan show. Um, but Todd Zuckerman joined our drummer from Styx, has been playing my solo shows from 2010 to 2020. So over that 10-year period, he and Terry, my brother Terry, had formed a rhythm section that was played well over 100 shows together. So Terry's name was at the top of the list when we needed someone fast, because they'd already been in a rhythm section. And although he's my brother, I was kind of the quietest voice in the room, because I thought, if you guys want this, I'll try to make it work. And
Family's
Chuck,
different.
correct, correct. Yes, I think you understand what I'm getting at. Funny enough, Chuck was kind of laughed about it and went, "Well, we had brothers in the band before, and somehow it worked out. So maybe we'll try it again." And
How's Chucky doing?
he's doing so well. I've never seen someone who was. When I joined in 1999, Chuck was really, really going through a major struggle with his health. I'll just say I actually thought he was at death's door, and apparently he did as well. He wrote a whole book about it, but he has every single year he has recovered remarkably, and he plays more. He played more shows with us these last 2 years than ever. So if ever there was a testament to somebody following doctor's advice, it's Chuck Panazzo. He has done that, and he's just in a few days now, he'll be turning 76 years of age, and he still comes out to the majority of shows. Hopefully you'll see him in Baltimore next week. It always comes down to how things are on the day for him, but he's doing remarkably well. And I won't even say remarkably well. He has triumphed over one of the highest challenges health-wise that a person can have. So Chuck's doing great.
Lawrence Gowan is here. He is in Styx. Styx is playing 3 shows next weekend in the area. Friday night at the Lyric, in case you got Springsteen tickets or you're a little hungover from that Pearl Jam thing on Thursday. Saturday, they're down at the beach. It's part of the whole bike weekend. Skinner's down there. ZZ Top's down there. The Cheap Trick's down there. I'm going to be down at the beach eating oysters next week as well. And then on Sunday night, they're up at the Hershey Theater, but that thing's almost sold out. So get down to the Lyric and check it out on Friday. All right, last thing, and this is where I'm going to have a little fun with you. Is your hair purple? I got to ask, what color is it right now? Is that purple?
That I believe is blue. It might show up as a purple on screen.
If you're in Baltimore, just say it's purple. We lost on Thursday. Just say it's
sorry.
purple.
Yes, this is because I knew I was talking to you today, Nestor. Sorry, we'll go back on that one. Yeah, I had this done in raven purple just for you.
My first ever favorite Styx song was probably Come Sail Away and Lady, Wooden Nickel in that era, but really Renegade, when that happened, I was 10 years old, 78, 79, and it was my favorite song until I went to Pittsburgh about 20 years ago. I've seen you dirty SOBs down there in that awful black and gold. Wear your purple hair when you do that, Lawrence. But I've also seen you guys sing the national anthem at a Ravens-Bears game. I have a picture with all of you in regalia. You were in the press box, and I'm like, the hell
Yeah.
Styx doing here? I'm like, oh, it's Chicago. That's why they're here, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this renegade thing, I've talked to JY about it. I've denounced it. I'm letting you know. I've denounced it with Mike Tomlin on a stage as
Wow.
well. The
Man,
renegade thing's a hell of a thing for you guys, right? I
it
mean,
is.
it makes you relevant every Sunday that the Steelers are home and on national TV. I like it better when they stink and they're not on national TV because I'm from Baltimore. But the
Yeah.
renegade thing, your band, whether it's I guess the cartoon that kept Come Sail Away. There's just pop culture things that make it happen, but nothing like football in America and the Pittsburgh Steelers and Renegade.
I have to agree. I have to agree. And yeah, it's a phenomenon. It's there they have T-shirts that say "Oh Mama." Actually,
I
they're gonna be
know,
selling.
I know. I've seen them in airports.
And
I've taken pictures
it's
of
the
people.
only NFL endorsed shirt that's outside of any team logo because there's no logo on there. It just says "Oh Mama," but people know what people tend to know. People like yourself tend to know what it's referring to, and
I
yeah,
would
well, that's
never wear that shirt, and I love your band, but
that's
it's
the that's
it's
the
black and
that's the
gold. I don't wear it. That's the way it works.
that's the sports affiliation. I understand it. I understand the passion that you have, Nestor. It's you're like
And
a
the
10 year
pride
old
I
boy.
had in your purple hair when I thought it was purple.
Well, for you, it's going to be purple. If you're gonna go on like a 10-year-old boy, I'm going to make it purple
It's
today.
maple leaf and blue jay blue is what it is. Um, Okay. Hey, I got a request. Lights. Just tell some. I'll be
I'm
at the
going to say
show.
it.
I'll
I'm
be
going
at
to
the
say
show
it.
next week. Well, I mean,
Really? Oh, good.
you've made time to come on with me, and I'm very appreciative because you're home. You work your ass off. All of you guys do. For you to take a little time with me today, I've always wanted to have you on. It was a thrill for me. I know it wasn't for you, but we got to talk about your favorite country, Canada.
It
So at
was a
least we did
thrill for
that.
me too. I always enjoy doing these because it's one of the nice things that happened after 2020 is so often I would do interviews with people over the radio and never get a chance to see them or see them briefly after a show and not be able to connect the fact that we had a good conversation. But you obviously you are a dyed in the wool Styx fan. You are definitely a Ravens fan, and you were
Here's
a
my
Baltimore.
1978 belt buckles. These are my
I have those.
Pacificas.
I only have the one on the. Oh yeah, I have the one on the right.
You have
That's
the
slightly different.
green or the maroon. Which one do
I've
you
got
have?
the
Is
more
green?
maroon one. I've got the more maroon one,
Yeah,
and the first one you held up, that one I wear on stage.
you do. You wear this one.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
this is an A&M. This was officially licensed
yeah.
from the record company back in the late
Great. I wish
'70s.
that we should start making those again. Yeah, I love those.
All
Yeah, they're
right,
great.
I'm gonna come sing songs with you next week at the Lyric. Styx is at the Lyric
Yes,
on a Friday night. They were out with this incredible tour all summer long with Foreigner and John Waite. They skipped Baltimore so they could come back and do a special on Friday night down at the
my
Lyric.
fault.
Thank you. Good luck to the Maple Leafs. I'm always hoping. I'm figuring Canada's going to burn down if that ever happens. Like if that ever happens, Canada's just going to take like the whole month of June will be off, and you guys will come back after Canada Day. Thank you for everything, all the years, and I'll see you next week. Okay.
Nestor, I look forward to it. All the best. Great chatting with you.
It's a hell of a Wurlitzer he has behind him as well. On our next episode, we'll find out what he has in his jukebox. Lawrence Gowan from Styx, JY, Tommy, Will Ivankovich. I pronounced his name wrong. I'm an idiot. And now Terry Gowan in the band playing bass. Maybe Chucky will come in as well. Hearty hello to Ricky Phillips. I love you in the babies as well. Bebop Aluba. You got 50s in there. You got real stuff.
78s, baby. Yeah.
Gatsby. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. Lawrence Gowan and I had more fun than I even thought we were going to have, and I knew we were going to have a lot of fun. Stay with us. We're Baltimore Positive.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks.